volume on, and whenever you're ready.
Okay. Well, it's 1:30. Good afternoon. We do have a quorum. We have one of our board members is remote today, Mr. Holt. But so the few action items that we have, we will take a roll call vote for those few items. But we do have a quorum, and we'll call the meeting to order. We'll recognize that this meeting is being held in compliance with the open door law and all the required notices that come with it. First order of business is the approval of minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes that were previously distributed. June 13th public meeting, a special hearing up in Gary on June 17th, and then the minutes of our executive session on July 11th. Any corrections or clarifications needed on those? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of June 13th, June 17th, and July 11th.
There is a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Should we take the roll, Emily? We have David Holt online. Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Mr. Joyce,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Holt,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes,
That's 4 here.
okay. Meeting minutes are adopted. Next, we have our period of public comment. We have, I know we have Dr. Steinberg in person here. If we'll invite you to speak.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Dr. Michaela Steinberg. I'm of the Fair Education Coalition. I'd like to take this opportunity as we look at these benchmarks, as we look at which ones were met, which ones weren't, to also consider why we arrived at a place where we needed these benchmarks. And to consider in future, I hope, my dearest hope is that we're never again in a position in this state where we're taking over schools for any reason. I do think that DUAB has a utility. I do think there's utility in trying to help schools understand how to manage their financing. I do think that there needs to be more done legislatively too, to help kind of iron out some of the difficulties that increasingly many schools are having. However, as we can see, for some reason, when we take things over, we forget what the function of them is sometimes. And especially when we take them over and have a contractor run them. And then later down the road, other people come in, kind of say, oh, maybe this isn't going as well. And then we're kind of trying to play catch up. I do wish that some of these benchmarks have been a little bit more precise, because there's so many ways. I mean, even with some of the ones that they met, it was like growth between 2 areas, any 2 areas within these 4 grade levels, but the growth is so incremental. And we don't even think about, I mean, is there in our testing a margin of error? Is there some way in which some of this isn't even measurable growth, but we're still very excited to reward people for fixing a problem that they helped to cause? I do hope in future that there's other things that are real early interventions that ever prevent us from getting to this point, so that we're not coming out of takeover and then in a situation where we still feel like, are we trying to get our feet out on, get our feet under us, both financially, but especially academically. I do feel like down the line longitudinally, when we talk about data, we're going to see a cohort of kids. We're going to see a very clear trend in data of kids that grew up under this, and their outcomes are not going to be the same. I do hope that there's something we can do for those kids down the line, because it wasn't fair to them. regardless of which set of adults we want to blame for what happened. At the end of the day, it's the kids that suffered. So I hope that we'll move forward in better ways. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any,
You can ask. I don't recognize anybody online.
okay, is there anyone who's remote or online that would like to speak? Okay. Hearing none, we will move into our next agenda, which is the MGT contract benchmarks. And Pete, you want to give us the overview and walk through what we've got here?
You bet. I will note that Mr. Parrish is online. He was willing to come, but I recommended for such a short meeting, it wasn't worth the airfare and so forth, so, but he's available for questions. But I will go ahead and present the benchmark. You've got 3 documents in your packet. First is just kind of an overview of all the benchmarks that are in the contract. The second, I've got the actual pages from the contract, so you can read the specific text that outlines those. And then the last is from MGT showing the academic results. So this was a 2-year contract for both the 22-23 and 23-24 school years. So this is for year 2, the 23-24 school year. So you see there's 6 academic benchmarks there. The last one, grad rate, won't be known until DOE certifies that next month. So we'll have that addressed in the future meetings. But of the others, see the I-Learn growth for ELA was partially met. The I-Read proficiency was partially met. The I-Ready typical growth for ELA was fully met. The math for I-Ready growth was partially met. And then the stretch goals for both ELA and math were fully met. In addition, down at the bottom, there's one for public forums. And there were the 8 meetings held during the last school year, so that's recommended to be credited as well. The other benchmark that we will also have to wait on until State Board of Accounts completes the audit is the financial reports and reserves, and so we'll deal with that in the future. But other than that, there's 7 benchmarks that are documented and recommended for approval.
Any questions for Pete, or as Pete mentioned, Eric is available online. Any questions? What is the pleasure of the board regarding approval of the benchmark payments on the contract?
Make a motion to approve benchmarks in the amount of $279,375.
Okay. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any comments or questions? So take the roll.
Mr. Joyce,
Yes.
Ms. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Holt,
yes,
Mr. Johnston.
Yes,
That's 4-0.
thank you very much. We'll move into new business. There are a couple of things that we want to raise today. One is, we'll take second, but I'll discuss it here, is the excess transfer. At the last meeting, we talked about the notifications between, through DUAB, but also through the Department of Education. We have one that has come in since our last meeting, and we'll with Lake Ridge, and we'll take that up here shortly. That's really just a notification. The first thing, though, I'd like us to consider is the 1065 expenditures approvals. Usually when that budget comes in, or if there's changes to those budgets, it comes before this body to approve those revisions. The statute says that the 1065, this process should continue through the end of this calendar year. But since the Gary Community School Corporation is no longer in distress status, I would offer for consideration whether, we could just delegate that, when that budget is finalized, delegate, that approval to the executive director. Have I captured the issue fairly?
Very much.
Okay.
I'd like to ask advice of council on that.
So technically for the actions that are there, just like, contract policies that the board has made and voted on as a decision that it says in statute that over a certain amount, that has to have a vote of the board. Now, it is difficult if you have to take official action on approving those, which it does say they have to be reviewed and approved. I think there could be criteria of just ensuring that this approval vote for it, because even when he were to bring the contract amount out, he would have to you with those contracts were to give you the update that you've delegated authority. I think the same thing would have to be here, or if there was something that could lend itself to being a rejection, then that would need to be brought to the board for full.
So if we made a
consideration.
motion that says that we would give him the authority to make that approval, as long as he sent us updates after that, and
Yes,
I
and-
believe that'd be sufficient.
Yes, updates after that, that would be discussed at the next public meeting of DUAB, so that it's on the official record, of what happened, or again, if you wanted it to be that it needed to be something that was, raising to an objection or a denial of the change that was proposed, that would come to the board for action. Which I think for the contracting one, you have both ways, it doesn't just for approval, so you have different options, but it would be consistent with that policy.
And just so we're clear on the subject matter at hand, similar to when ESSER deadlines were coming, we're now coming to the end of 1065. Some projects came in under budget, and so they would like to reallocate those to different projects. So the intent was to have that on the agenda today. We've been in communication, they weren't quite ready, and we don't plan to have another public meeting for the end of the year. So the thought was this would be a way to go ahead and handle that approval without having the board meeting.
So with that caveat or
Yeah, okay.
provision to bring the matter back for either ratification or,
It's okay to do that during your business.
That was kind of an internal control policy. I can't remember honestly if it was did during new business, the introduction of that policy and approval by the board. It could be something that if you wanted to wait until the next scheduled board meeting, we have one that is coming up. that
We
you-
don't have one scheduled till after the first of the
Yeah, that's
year,
why.
so the curve.
Yeah, I think for an abundance of caution, it is always difficult to make a decision that will be voted on or agreed to by a board in a new business section, because there's not a public notice provided. But then again, we're in a situation where the statute is contemplating something that in practicalities just doesn't exist. So an abundance of caution, it could be done in a new meeting.
Well, why don't we just set it through recommendation rather than a motion, make a recommendation that you notify us, and then we'll address it at the next meeting.
I'm just would want them to be able to proceed on those projects.
Oh, I agree.
But if we wanted to have another one of these meetings, a brief one in December, we could do it.
You could do the recommendation too, that's similar to the delegation that is done for contracting, that is a written policy that could be under a resolution that is reviewed by the board at that time too.
what if the school corporation does not start on any approved project until after the first of the year?
What if they don't? So there's therefore. no-
So then there's no change to this budget and then the law expires at December 31st.
Absolutely. That is also the reality that we could be talking about something right now in new business, but if we want to go, being the abundance of caution, not in new business, that we wait until December, that if they don't do any projects. So I think the recommendation from the board could be, if you have become aware that there are projects that are going to begin before that date that would facilitate the conversation of the board, we can consider that at a meeting in December. If you're not aware of that, then the recommendation is that there's no need to schedule the meeting in December.
That's a lot for me.
What's that?
It's a lot for me.
Because there's not a clear delineation of an amount or threshold or a statute, I do think that you're okay to talk about the policy here in the meeting.
I just think based on what we've done in the past, that you have the authority to do that.
Mhm.
And then at the next meeting, report it to us.
And if you'd like
I
to
think
have
it's
that,
been the policy we've had.
I think a recommendation could be that, similar to the contract delegation that is done, that is in a written policy that was adopted by the board via resolution, and whenever the next scheduled meeting is, if that is something that you want to expand that delegation out to incorporate something like this, it would be a revision of that policy overall. That could be memorialized and one, a document provided to the board for review, that could be a resolution considered at the next meeting, as well as any other items that could be brought up for consideration. So that's more of a procedural, bigger picture outside of this, but there could be other things that could fall under that delegation for the executive director.
Okay. I'm not sure where to take this, actually.
I think what the conversation is that it's within kind of most of the authorities here. But if the board would like to memorialize that more formally outside of just this specific instance for the remainder of the year, given that there's a month and a half, they could do that next time. But I think during new business, because there's not a threshold in statute, I don't think there's running afoul of the ability to delegate by mutual agreement of the board right now to the director, just like other things that have been delegated to the board of phone calls or other procedural steps that are a part of implementing that the board is in favor of when it comes to situations or categories of schools. So. Make a motion, make a recommendation now, I think it would be okay to do so.
What's that?
I don't know what to do. You write me a motion. And then I'll say, yes, that was the motion.
You want me to write it down for you, or you can say it out loud?
Let me say it out loud.
Do you like to consider a formal modification of policies in the future as part of your motion? Or would you just like to address the issue at hand? So I believe what I'm hearing from members of the board, time similar to the board has delegated authority to the executive director of the board for contracts over a certain amount, but under a certain threshold, to have the authority of the board to proceed with granting and approving those. The board would like to have a similar delegation of authority to the executive director of the board for any 1065 plan or docket plan revisions from now until the end of the year, that if those come in for consideration before the December 31st, we receive any of those potentially after that, or just by that date.
We wouldn't have the authority after
It
that.
wouldn't have the authority, yes. So coming in for consideration of DUAB on or before December 31st, 2024, the board would move to give that delegation of authority to the executive director to handle those and report back to the board at their next regularly scheduled meeting of any actions that were taken.
I make that motion.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. The roll, sir.
Mr. Joy?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Holt?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration of that. As I mentioned, we had the excess transfer reporting from Lake Ridge. Why don't you just give us an
Yeah,
overview?
and this is just simply adhering to the law. We're supposed to recognize when those excess transfer responses come in, and your goal. This is really a DOE judgment that we just are part of the process to provide advice as well. Lake Ridge's response came in on June 17th. That was the same day we had that special hearing up in Gary, so that was too late to add to that agenda. It's for time we met since then, so we're simply acknowledging receipt. There's no action that's to be taken.
Thank you very much. That is our agenda for today. Is any other business to come before the board before we adjourn and move into the executive session? Hearing none, we stand adjourned. We'll move into executive session.